I was 23 when I took my first solo winter trip to the mountains. I just quit a job I hated and ended a relationship that drained me. My therapist said I needed solitude, so I booked a week in a rustic cabin rental near the outskirts of a forest reserve in Vermont, far from anything or anyone. It wasn't even a real rental. Just a friend of a friend who knew a guy with an off-grid hunting cabin. Wood stove, no internet, basic electricity, but warm enough. I wasn't looking for luxury. I was looking for stillness. I arrived on a Tuesday morning, right before the snow was supposed to hit hard. The owner, a burly, soft-spoken man named Hank, met me in town and gave me directions. Don't expect cell signal, he warned, but you'll be all right. Got firewood stacked. Propane's full. If the storm gets bad, just hunker down. I made it up the trail by noon. The place was smaller than I expected. One room with a kitchen area, a table, a narrow bed, and a pull-out couch. Old snowshoes hung on the walls, next to antlers and faded maps. It felt old but charming in a way. That night, the snow came hard. I watched it swirl under the yellow porch light, thick and silent. I felt completely alone, in a good way, until the next morning. I woke to a knock, not loud. Just two dull raps on the front door. I sat up, heart already racing. The window beside. The bed was fogged, but I could see it was still snowing. I checked the time. 6:17 a.m., another knock. I hesitated, then stepped into my boots and crept to the door. I didn't open it. I called out, "Hello." No answer. I waited a minute, then pulled the curtain aside. A man was standing there. Not Hank. This guy was shorter. Lean. Probably mid-50s, with a thick wool coat and a red beanie pulled low over his face. He was holding a duffel bag and looked soaked from the snow. His face was pale. "Cabin owner," he called out. "I've been renting this place every January for 10 years. They didn't tell you?" His voice had an edge of panic, but also confusion. I opened the door a crack. "Hank gave me the place for the week. Said no one else was booked." The man shivered. "I've got nowhere to go. My truck's buried 2 miles down. Roads are impassable. Please, just let me come in and dry off." He looked rough, but not dangerous. Just desperate. I opened the door and let him in. He stomped off his boots and thanked me under his breath. I poured him some instant coffee while he peeled off his wet gloves. He introduced himself as Ray. "I've been coming here for over a decade," he said, warming his hands by the stove. Hank must have screwed up. "This storm wasn't supposed to get this bad till tomorrow." I nodded, unsure. Something about him felt off, not in any obvious way. Just a quiet tension under his calm demeanor. A stiffness. His eyes didn't seem to match his expressions. "Where's your truck?" I asked. He gestured vaguely. "Down the old trail. Got stuck trying to make the bend near the stream. I had to hike an hour through this shit." His clothes were soaked, so I lent him a pair of my sweats. We sat in silence for a while. He didn't ask questions, didn't make small talk, just stared at the fire. That's when I noticed something. He kept glancing at my backpack. Later, while he napped on the couch, I stepped outside to breathe. The snow was up to my knees. No cell signal. The nearest house was a good 2 miles back toward the town. The road in, gone under a blanket of white. I wasn't going anywhere. When I stepped back in, Ray was awake, but he pretended to be asleep until he heard the door shut. That night, I barely slept. I kept the knife from the kitchen under my pillow. He hadn't done anything wrong, but his presence turned the cabin cold. I caught him watching me twice when I stirred, his eyes open, unblinking, just watching at one point around 3 a.m. I heard him whispering to himself. I couldn't make out the words by the third day. The storm still hadn't stopped, and Ray's story started to crack. First, he said he was from Albany. Then later, he mentioned living in Maine. He couldn't remember Hank's last name, so he just calls him. He asked me what kind of phone I had, then asked to see it. I said no. That night, I locked the bathroom door while I brushed my teeth. When I came out, he was standing in the dark by the kitchen, staring out the window. You ever think about how fast you disappear out here? Yes, suddenly. I froze. He smiled, slowly, without turning. I mean, this snow. It erases everything. I didn't answer. I just got in bed and kept the knife closer. The next morning, I found my bag unzipped. I hadn't touched it. He was outside, pretending to shovel snow with a plank. I searched his duffel bag when he wasn't looking. Inside, a small hand axe. A knife in a leather sheath. No toothbrush. No socks. No wallet. No ID. Nothing you'd expect someone trapped to have. Just tools. That evening, I confronted him. He said you've been coming here 10 years. What year did Hank sell? The place? He blinked. What? Hank doesn't own it anymore. His brother does. He died last fall. Car accident. It was in the news. Ray didn't speak. Just stared. I lied. I had no idea. I was bluffing. But he believed it. He stood. Slowly. I think I should leave. He said the road was buried. He tilted his head. Then I'll dig. He put on his coat and stepped out into the storm. He didn't come back that night. Didn't sleep. Just sat by the fire, watching the shadows creep along the ceiling. At some point near dawn, I heard something heavy drag across the porch. I gripped the knife and waited. No knock. Just silence, then faint footsteps. On the roof, my heart pounded. I didn't move. Eventually, the noise stopped. The storm finally cleared the next day. Late in the afternoon, a snowplow rumbled past the trail. I grabbed my things, left a note, and hiked down with shaking legs at the edge of the tree line. I looked back once. There were boot prints in the snow leading around. The cabin, behind the cabin, to the window where I slept, but none led away. A week later, I called Hank Gott. He was shocked. Said he'd never heard of anyone named Ray. Said no one else had keys. I've only rented it to 2 people this year, he said. He ... and my cousin back in October. Does anyone else know about the place? He paused. There was a break-in last January. A vagrant, maybe. We never found him. He sounded nervous. Wait, did he say he was renting it? I didn't answer. I just hung up. I moved back to my hometown after the divorce, not because I missed it, but because it was cheap. My aunt had left me a small house in a quiet, forgotten stretch of upstate New York, near the old railroad that used to run through the forest. People called it Deadline because the train stopped running in the 70s after a derailment killed. A few engineers no one ever fixed the tracks. They just let them rot. Now they sat hidden behind overgrowth and snow, curling like broken bones behind. The tree line at the edge of my backyard. The house was modest. 1 floor, basement, creaky wood floors. But it was mine. And after what I'd been through, I needed that. Winter came early that year. By late November, the whole town was white. The wind carried a stillness that felt like it belonged to something older than weather. That's when the footprints started. It was a Sunday morning when I noticed them. I was sipping coffee by the window that looked out over the backyard, half watching the snowfall. And I saw them, prints, human, barefoot. They led from the edge of the forest, across the backyard, down toward the old tracks. I squinted. No way someone was out walking barefoot in 20-degree weather. Put on boots and a coat and stepped outside. The prints were definitely human, toes and all. But what caught me was how deep they were, as if the person who made them was either very heavy or stepping slowly, deliberately. I followed them until they stopped, right at the tracks. Then they vanished. No return path. No signs of struggle. Just gone. I felt a chill that wasn't from the cold. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 1 a.m., I got up to grab water, and as I passed the kitchen window, I glanced out. The prints were there again, but this time they were fresh, still soft. Around the edges, still sinking slightly under the slow, falling snow. I flicked on the porch light. No one in sight. I went out with a flashlight, half expecting to see some prankster hiding in the trees, but the tracks stopped at the same place again. Right. where the rails bent and vanished into the woods, and they were still barefoot. I called the local police the next day, not to make a full report, just to ask. The guy on the phone was older. Said his name was Sergeant Klein. People around here say weird stuff happens on that track, he said. Usually it's kids messing around, but if it's happening multiple nights, maybe set up a camera. I did. I had an old trail cam I'd used for bird watching. I mounted it to the back post of the porch, aimed it straight at the tracks. That night, I left the light off. Watched from inside, sipping coffee like always. Nothing came, but the next morning when I checked the footage, something had died at 2:13. The camera triggered. A figure stepped into frame from the woods, tall, thin, completely naked. Their body was pale, like paper soaked in milk. The footage was grainy, but I could tell it wasn't just a person. Something about the proportions was off. The arms were too long, the knees bent wrong that it moved slowly across the yard, then stopped, and looked straight at the camera. No face, just smooth skin where eyes and mouth should have been, as if someone had erased them with a sponge. Then it turned and walked to the tracks. And disappeared beyond the trees. I sat frozen for hours, replaying the video over and over. I didn't want to believe it. Maybe it was a prank. Someone in a suit, but the footprints were back again. Deep, fresh. Bare. The next night. I stayed up. Lights off. Knife on the table. It came back at 2:09 a.m. I didn't see it approach. I heard it first. A low, wet crunching sound. Not like footsteps. More like dragging meat across a wet floor. When I looked out the window, it was standing 10 feet from the house, closer than ever before. Still, watching. But this time, it raised a hand, slowly, deliberately, like it was waving. I ducked. Down, didn't breathe. Prayed it hadn't seen me. When I looked again, it was gone. I sent the video to the police. Klein showed up the next morning. He didn't say much, just watched the footage. Watched me. Then he said, "You ever hear of the boy who went missing here? Back in '77? I shook my head. He told me a kid named Jared Wells disappeared after chasing a dog into the woods behind the tracks. They never found him. Only his shoes sitting neatly beside the rails. People said the tracks took him," Klein muttered. "Old stories, old fears, but you've seen something. So maybe they weren't wrong?" That night, I didn't set up the camera. I nailed plywood across the back door, shut the blinds, locked every window, slept with the lights on. At 2:11 a.m., my smoke detector went off. There was no fire. Just something. Inside the house, something walking, slowly. Across the creaking floorboards, I held my breath in the closet, knife shaking in my hand. The sound stopped outside the door, then a soft, slow tap, not knocking. Just touching. I didn't come out until daylight. The prints were inside the house. All the way to my bedroom door, but never leading out. The final night, I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just stood by the window with the lights off, waiting. At 2:10 a.m. I saw movement by the tracks. This time, two figures emerged. Identical, pale, faceless, one slightly smaller than the other. They stood at the edge of the forest, hand in hand, and turned their heads toward the house and smiled, not with mouths. They didn't have any, but with their bodies. A tilt of the shoulders, a stillness so precise it felt mocking. Then they turned and walked back into the trees. The next day, I packed up and left. I couldn't sell the house. Still can't, but I never went back. Last I heard, someone else moved. And they lasted 2 weeks. The sheriff found the place empty, door wide open, food on the stove, just one thing left behind. A trail of bare footprints, leading from the bedroom. To the tracks. I was 16 the winter the power went out. My parents had gone to visit my aunt 4 hours north, and I convinced them to let me stay home. It was the weekend before finals, and I told them I needed quiet to study. Truthfully, I just wanted the house to myself. No siblings. No noise. That Friday night, the ice storm hit hard by 10 p.m. The trees outside were groaning under the weight. The air itself sounded like glass being twisted and cracked. The power blinked once. Then everything went dark. I sat in the living room with a flashlight, waiting for the backup generator to kick in. It didn't. My phone said, no service. The house was wrapped in silence. Not peaceful silence, but that unnatural kind that feels like the world has paused and forgotten to restart. Then I heard the knock at first. I thought it was a branch, but it came again. This time, sharper. 3 distinct knocks on the front door. I froze. No car in the driveway. No footsteps on the porch. Just knocks. I grabbed my flashlight and crept toward the entrance. Shined it through the window beside the door. No one. I waited. Nothing. I told myself it was ice. Expanding wood. A trick of the storm, but I didn't sleep that night. The next evening. The power was still out. I kept the fire going in the living room. Wrapped myself in blankets. Tried not to look at the windows, which were now fogged with frost and dripping with icicles like teeth. That's when the lights flickered on. For just a second, long enough for me to see something. Just outside the back sliding glass door. It wasn't human. Too tall. Too thin. Its skin looked gray, like wet cement. No clothes. Just long limbs pressed awkwardly against the glass. Like it was trying to understand the barrier between us. Then the lights cut out again, and it was gone. I ran upstairs, locked myself in my room, but the house was old, and I could hear everything. The creak of floorboards, the tap of claws or maybe fingers, brushing against windows, circling the house again and again. Around 3 a.m., I heard it crawl onto the roof, the sound of ice cracking underweight. A slow, deliberate shuffle. It stayed there until dawn. The following day. I decided to make a break for it. I couldn't call anyone. My phone battery was dying, and there was still no signal. But the storm had passed. I figured if I could get to the neighbors, I'd be fine. I bundled up, took the flashlight and a crowbar, and opened the garage. Everything outside looked like it had been flash frozen. The driveway was a sheet of glass. The trees were statues, but there were prints in the ice, clawed, almost hoof-like, leading from the woods to the side of the house. I followed them with my eyes. They didn't come from anywhere. They started mid-yard. Like something had dropped out of the sky. Never made it to the neighbors. About halfway down the road, I slipped and hit my head. Not hard, but enough to leave me dazed. When I sat up, the sun was setting, and I saw it again. Standing at the edge of the woods. Still watching. It didn't chase me. It didn't move, but I ran. Back to the house. Slammed the door. Bolted it shut. I stayed up again that night. Lights out. Fire dying. I kept the crowbar in hand and watched the door. It never knocked again. But it came inside. I don't know how. There was no noise. No broken locks. No footprints. I just remember opening my eyes and seeing it standing in the hallway outside my bedroom. No face. Just 2 black slits where eyes might have been. It tilted its head. And mimicked me, like it was studying me. It raised its hand when I raised mine. Stepped left when I stepped right. It wasn't just watching. It was learning. Then it backed away into the dark. The next morning, the power came back. I packed a bag, ran to the neighbor's house, and stayed there until my parents returned too. Days later, I didn't tell them everything. Just that I heard something in the storm, that I'd gotten scared. They laughed. Told me it was just ice playing tricks. But I still see it sometimes. Only in the winter. Only during storms. And reflections. In. Glass. Always standing behind me, watching. Learning.